It is the Anfield Wrap. It is John Gibbons hosting this week. In the absence of Neil Atkinson, who's travelling back from Glastonbury with 80% of the rest of the Anfield Wrap quiet up there this morning. You come in, Jay, didn't you? Not many in from the Anfield Wrap. But they're all on the way back. Hope they've all had a lovely time in the sunshine. But we're having a lovely time here because we have got Beth Lindop, we've got James Mckenna, and we've got Ian Ryan. And we're going to talk a little bit about a few different things really, because there's not huge amounts going on. So part 3, I thought I'd delve into what we did in lockdown, which is on this day, and we're going to have a chat about a Liverpool, in inverted commas, legend. We shall see how people feel about that. In part 2, because Jay's not allowed a day off, we're going to talk about ticket changes. As soon as I saw you in it, I was like, oh, never mind. We're going to talk about the changes to the ticketing that has been announced by the club last week, and what supporters and indeed the supporters board think of that. But in part 1, Ian, we're going to talk about Harvey Elliott, because he's had a great weekend, hasn't he? Had a great couple of weeks. He's thrived for the under-21s, and before we get into his future, it's just nice to see, because he's obviously a good lad. He throws all of himself onto the pitch whenever he wears a Liverpool shirt and indeed an England shirt, and he's had a fantastic tournament. He got player of the tournament. England have won it, and I'm pleased for him.
Yeah, made up for him. What is it, 5 goals in 6 games, something like that. I think from my personal own point of view, just got far more invested in the 21 team than I ever would in the kind of, the main team, to be honest. And I'm
with Taliban, come on, I was like, yes, boy.
And most of that is because of, the 3 lads who've obviously been playing there from our club, and Harvey Elliott, he's had an absolutely stellar tournament. Now, as you said, player of the tournament there. You knew he was capable of that. I think when you talk about him in the context of Liverpool, people will then inevitably say, should we keep him? But it is a very different level of football, and I think you have to remember that. But just judging it on what he's done over there, he's been outstanding, absolutely outstanding. And as I say, he's probably done him no harm at all in terms of confidence, because you can imagine last season, the season he had, he would have been desperate to play more. He didn't get those opportunities for whatever reason. Jürgen had said the previous year he wished he'd used them more, but he still did use them quite a bit. You'd see him come off the bench, influence games, affect games. There wasn't really any of that last season. I think he starts about 6 games, all comps, and the ones in the league he's only starting once the season's pretty much done and dusted, essentially. So you felt for him for large parts of last season. So for him to get that at the end there, and for him to have such a role and play such a pivotal part in getting the under-21 team over the line, delighted for him.
Yeah, he seemed to put a lot of responsibility on himself as one of the senior players, and that sounds funny at under-21 level, but he's played a lot at that level. He was involved in the squad a couple of years ago, started a little bit less, but I was really impressed with him whenever I saw him, his level of performances, but also big goals in big moments. He gets the first one in the final, he gets the 2 against Holland, when especially that second one where they'd just been pegged back, and then he just slaloms through and slots it, and it says a lot about him as his personality, that he's able to lead what is a really talented team in such an effective way.
Yeah, he's got so much quality, and was delighted he got the chance to show that, and like you say, taking on a little bit more of a leadership role as well. And I think he's been around so long now, it's easy to forget how young he is. He's still only 22, and he's you don't achieve the things he's achieved in his young career without being exceptionally talented. But I think, like you say, that one of the things that's impressed me most is just the way that he's carried himself, even in sort of post-match things. He's and he has been for a long while. He's so eloquent whenever you speak to him post-match and stuff. He always says the right things, but you get the feeling that he genuinely means them. It's not just sort of he's trotting out cliches. So yeah, really, really pleased. I think, from a Liverpool perspective, if he does move on this summer, it's done his valuation no harm at all. And I think if he does leave, whoever gets him has a really talented player on hands.
I mean, but should he leave? That's the question. You see him playing this well, Jay, and you're like, is it mad to be considering letting him go? I saw someone tweeting that if you saw Jarell Kwanzaa and what he's doing, if he was an Inter Milan defender and you saw him out, what he's been doing, bringing the ball out, and you saw Harvey Elliott doing that for, I don't know, Napoli, you'd be like, sign them to young lads.
Yeah, you'd fancy them, wouldn't you? And I think that's where it's really it's harsh. It's also probably just a reminder to people in general that, like, judging players is very, very difficult. It's clearly why the Liverpool, certainly when you look at how they've signed players, lots of them they've been linked with previously, or they've been monitoring them for a long time to see how they are. they've performed very well in a way. They've, it's cliched in it, but they put themselves in the shop window. Well, apart from Concert, obviously, who's been sold, but that I think for someone like Elliott gives him options. I think the unfortunate thing for them is, in terms of this, is if they were just breaking through into the Liverpool team now and had had this summer of performances, I think people would be saying, yeah, let's give them another year, let's give them a little bit more. I think Tyler Morton's probably the one who's getting that in people's minds because he's been out on loan and now is, in or around the first team squad. People might like to see him get a little bit more. But we was talking about this at Kids Footy yesterday, and it's almost like we've gone past them players a little bit, and it's just not their fault. It's just circumstance. They will have, and hopefully, I'll get proven wrong on this, but they will have really good careers at a decent, good European side, getting good cup runs. Almost Liverpool of maybe even a couple of years back. Maybe some of them Klopp teams, they might have found a role to play, but we are looking at signing players if you're Elliott, where are we putting Elliott in ahead of Wirtz and Salah? So watching him in isolation for England under 21, yeah, he does look good, but we've seen him play. We've seen he doesn't have that impact on the team as much, haven't played for us. I'd like to think he could do it. What I'd like to see from Elliott if he does move on, and I think he will if you've seen him at the end of the game, at the end of the season, last game, he was crying. Clearly, I think he knew this was his last moment in front of the Kop. I'd like us to think of a buyback clause, if you could get that, in the same way we are apparently done with Kwanzaa, because I think if he does prove you wrong again, seeing someone saying, I think Chelsea got rid of Salah at a slightly older age than Elliott is now, and we'd all look at that and say, should you have done it? But there's also players who go at this age and never do reach them heights as well. It's a gamble, innit? Same with signing the players we have. So I think the reality is, yeah, he does need to move on for his own sake as well. I think he'd love to be in the position where Liverpool needed to buy him back in 2 years' time, or wanted to buy him back in 2 years' time. But I don't think he'll play enough to do that. In the same way, I don't think Kwanzaa would. I think Kwanzaa's a brilliant player for all the stuff we've seen, but we probably all think there's a mistake in him sometimes and a bit of concentration. And I think, well, that's something he's only going to improve by going and playing regularly. Yeah. We just can't give him that, and we can't give Elliott that. It'd be fascinating to see if he does go somewhere else. Can he carry on that leadership role? Because he's clearly took on that responsibility for England under 21s. He doesn't shake even when he plays for Liverpool. Comes on, he wants the ball, wants to get involved. So can he go and do that regularly somewhere and see what that means? Maybe a left field option. Is there a loan somewhere? A loan with a potential to buy if he proves himself somewhere. But I think he'd want to be playing at a senior level, until we want to send the lads out on loan, not get no money for him guaranteed, and knock us out a competition somewhere down the line.
You'd argue as well, in terms of his fee or his potential fee, his stock is really, really high now in terms of people will have watched him in that tournament. The level of football is important because I've watched quite a few of them, the 21 games, different teams. When they're kicking off the matches, it's really, really warm, really hot, really humid. There's not a lot of pressing going on in some of those games. So good footballers have got lots and lots of space to influence and affect matches. And I think you've seen that with Elliott. That's not to say he's not a good player. He's a really, really good player. And he's good enough to play or to be involved in the Liverpool squad moving forward, in my opinion. But is he good enough to be starting games at our club on a very, very regular basis? I'd say he probably just falls a little bit short, and the manager would agree with that point because he didn't start him last season at all. And you could make the case that next season he might start the same or even less, given what's coming in. If Liverpool have a similar season in terms of injuries and stuff like that, which is a massive shame for him because you've seen him come on in games, and the coming on in games is important because I always felt with Elliott, he was better at coming on and affecting matches than he was maybe starting them. And I think that's a testament to him in a way, in how he kind of views the game, because I remember him saying once that when he was a sub, he wasn't the kind of sub that just messed about a little bit on the bench. He looked at the game.
I mean, he said it to me, but that's fine.
Well, that's what I mean. That's what I mean. Then John, you know what I mean?
An interview with John Gibbons from the Anfield Wrap.
But he said that, didn't he? And he said he looks at football matches and he knows, or he gets a feel for how he can go on and then influence them. That's a really impressive trait to have. But watching him start matches sometimes, you maybe would feel like it passing by a little bit. There's always the physicality thing as well. Not just his own physicality, but what else is going on in the team. And if you put him into a midfield position, that also includes McAllister. You are quite small in that part of the pitch, so that maybe that goes against him a little bit. He's had hard lines, but he is good enough to go and play for a top Premier League team in the top half, and you'd have to say go and play Champions League football maybe for someone as well. So if he is thinking about maybe going abroad, or there's teams like Spurs where he'd go there and you'd think he'd have an impact, he'd play Champions League football, that kind of thing. Absolutely see him doing that. If he wants to stay and kick around, I think everyone, broadly speaking, would be happy. But the point is, would he be happy doing that? And as Jay touched on, his comments towards the end of the season would suggest that he knows it's a short career, and he's had a career where it's been punctured by injuries for him as well, bad ones at times, where it's taken him a little bit of time to overcome them. So he's probably looking at that and thinking, I might just not get enough opportunities. And I would not be surprised, given the kind of manager Slot is, he may well have had the combo with him and said, listen, you're not going to get that many starts, and if it's that, that's the most important thing to you, is starting week in, week out. You may have to go and do that elsewhere.
I wonder if he had that conversation with him before the end of the season.
Yeah.
Though. I wonder if
he probably has, Jess, what I'm saying. He probably has had that conversation, I reckon.
I was going to say it's purely speculative, but I do think there has been a conversation at some point between, when did Liverpool play PSG away? Was it
late February?
Late February.
March.
I think between them then and sort of the last month of the season, I think there was a conversation, because a few of us spoke to him after that PSG game, and he was very emphatic in the fact, this is my club and I want to stay and fight and want to prove. And obviously he was on a bit of a high. He'd obviously come on and scored the winner, but then the tone very much shifted then in the back end of the season. So I think there probably has been a conversation there where the manager has said, and like Ian said, Slot isn't the sort of manager we know to beat around the bush, and I'm sure he respects Elliott enormously and wouldn't mind having him as part of the squad. But I think he's at the age now where he could be a really, really top player. I think he could have a really, really successful career in the Premier League. And I think the risk if he stays at Liverpool is that he peters out a little bit, and then his stocks are less high, and he wants to get a move next summer, and maybe the money isn't there or the options aren't quite as high quality. So I think for him, as much as I'm sure he'd love to play for Liverpool for the rest of his career, I think it probably is the best thing for him to move on.
I think he knows, because there's probably clips of this, isn't there? But the last game of the season, players with the trophy, they're all in front of the Kop, and where I'm in 103, quite low down, I'm like row 19, and he was stood just back to the side of the goal with his family, and all the players were, Trent was there, and all the players, he was upset and whatever, but Elliott stood there talking to his parent in his seat, and the next minute he's literally hugging his dad, and he is physically sobbing. Like, he's not like, just tears rolling down his face, he is sobbing. Someone has to give him a pair of sunglasses to hide his face, and then the Kop, I think, kind of realises, and he gets a little bit of an ovation. But he knows then, he's like stood there thinking like, it's not the crowning of Liverpool winning the league and the joy of that. It's like he knows this is the last time he's going to get to do that. And it's maybe these things are ordered in saying, maybe he's gone to the Euros to give himself more options, or to remind everyone how good he is, because he is a very, very good player. We're just fortunate enough to be Liverpool and hopefully operating at a level above that now. And that's just unfortunate for him. Brilliant for us. At the same time, it's really difficult.
It's brilliant for us, Ian, but it does make you think, well, if Harvey can't do it, then how hard is it for any sort of young player breaking through it? I think we do like to see young players sort of giving a go. You like the idea of a young kid who's signing up at 9 years old, having a chance to play for Liverpool. It's always been hard. It's always been difficult. How many do make it? But are we getting to the point now where, is it almost impossible for you think at a club like Liverpool, where we want to operate, to be a sort of young player? Would Trent have got as many opportunities as he had now? Would we have persevered with others? You fancy someone like Fowler always would have make it, but it's at the level you'd have to be like one of the best strikers ever, because it would be a little bit of a shame, really, if we get to a point where you say, well, to play for Liverpool, you've got to be 22, world-class elite, have 100 games under your belt. Are we getting to that? Is that inevitable?
The bar should be high, John. It should be unbelievably high to play for the football club, and I think that's Slot's opinion. And no matter where you're from, the bar's the bar. So it doesn't really matter, if you're local or you're not. You've got to hit certain levels and certain standards. And Harvey Elliott's had a good Liverpool career. He's been there 6 years. He's made nearly 150 appearances. That's far more than a lot of people. And he's won the fucking lot, by the way. Now listen, he's played a bigger role in certain competitions than others, but he still won every trophy there is to win. So listen, fair play to him for having a career like that. Under a different manager, maybe he gets to stay around a little bit longer. Every chance that would have been the thing. But I think, the bar should always remain really, really high for this football club. And I think since the manager's come in, he's made that really clear to everyone. So absolutely everyone. If you're going to play for this team on a consistent basis, then you've got to be able to meet these standards. And I've got absolutely no problem with that, because guess what? That means Liverpool will go on and be really successful, in my opinion. So, you mentioned some names there. People like Trent and Farrell, they'll always come through because they're unbelievably gifted. Gerrard, no one's stopping them. Yes, you need an opportunity. A player gets injured, you get your chance, you've got to seize it. That will always be the case. But the very, very best will always, in my opinion, that cream will rise to the top, and it has done for those players you've mentioned there. So it's hard lines for him. If it ends up being one of them where he has to go elsewhere, Jay's point there about the sell-on clause, I think that's more important in football now. I think when Liverpool end up getting Elliott, I think it goes to a tribunal, doesn't it? And I think Fulham have got a 20% sell-on clause, so if we do sell him, they'll get some of that cash as well. So it's important that Liverpool are thinking along those lines. I'm sure they will be. We've seen the Quanta thing. That looks like it's going to have something similar in there, or a buyback, whatever it may be. So important to be thinking about those opportunities. But listen, he's played his part, and he's got some big moments in a Liverpool shirt, and no one, absolutely no one can take them away from him.
Yeah, so he's had a good Liverpool career, and he joins as a teenager. He's not quite an academy prospect, but he joins from Fulham, like Ian says, and he's been able to live all our dreams. And he might sort of feel like he stuck in at the end when that was possible, because I think for the next Harvey Elliott it will be harder. And I think it was noticeable to me. Like Ian says, you cheer on 3 Liverpool lads. I don't think any of them will be Liverpool lads on the 1st of August. Quanta's already on his way. I think it's just this tournament that's held up his move. I think it's his medical, maybe even today. I think there was some pictures of her knocking about. Tyler Morton wanted to move on last year, fair play. It didn't quite sort of happen for him because of the midfield situations. He'll be sort of itching to go, and then Elliott as well. And it is sort of a slightly strange thing to think, well, they're the best young players in the country, and if they're not sort of quite good enough, I don't know. If I'm a 17-year-old looking at it, I am a little bit worried.
Yeah, it's a hard situation, and I think somewhere there has to be a compromise. From a romantic point of view, you would love to think that you could have a team full of academy lads who've come through.
That was what Jürgen said his aim was.
Yeah, from the age of 6, and they come through and they make it all the way to the top. And there was obviously that lovely moment last year, and I think that's why that Carabao Cup win was so special, because there were so many academy lads involved. But the reason those things are so special is because they don't happen very often, and I don't think any other club than Liverpool would have pulled that off in the way that Liverpool did in 2024. So yes, that would be lovely, but ultimately football is a results driven business, and it's about, if you're Liverpool Football Club and you're a fan of Liverpool Football Club, you want them to be as successful as possible. And maybe the trade-off for that is that you do outsource and you bring in players from elsewhere, because I think if fans were 100% honest with themselves, I'm sure the vast majority would rather Liverpool be competing every year for the Premier League title, for the Champions League, winning all the big honours, than having a squad full of academy lads, even though that would be great. If you could have both, that would be fantastic. But it's not just a Liverpool thing. You look at all the top clubs. I mean, Manchester United obviously have a really rich history for bringing through from bringing through young players, and you look at the situation there, and at the moment, Kobbie Mainoo, who was sort of the brightest young hope last season, now is being talked about potentially being up for sale this summer. So it's happening at all clubs, and it's sad, I guess. In one sense, it's an indictment of how much money now is in the game, and how the inflated the market is, and how competitive it is across Europe. But unfortunately, I think it's just the way that it is, and I think it is something you just sort of have to accept a little bit. And I think Liverpool as well, academies, obviously it'd be great if you could produce an 11 full of academy kids, but it is also about producing players who are capable of going on and having careers in the game anywhere. You look at Nico Williams, for example. I remember when he came through, and I thought he was out of that sort of age group, even more so than Curtis Jones. Actually, I think he'll make it at Liverpool, and I think perhaps if Trent hadn't been there, he might have got a little bit more of a chance than he did. But you look at him now playing for Forest, really unlucky obviously to miss out on Champions League football, but they've got Europe. Starting week in, week out. He's loved there at Forest. He's probably going to go on and have a really, really successful career, great international career as well. So it's about whether it's the Premier League, whether it's Championship, League One, League Two, it's about producing footballers who can go on and be successful. If that's at Liverpool, great. If not, then, you just got to hope you can get as sort of cold and callous as this sounds, money for them, and then they can go on and be successful.
It's circumstantial, isn't it?
Yeah.
Trent, if Liverpool have a boss right back, well, Trent's still in the youth team, Trent doesn't get the chance at Liverpool. Trent's a centre mid that they turn into a right back. There's a wonderful piece I remember reading about Alex Inglethorpe essentially coaching him, playing right back for a year in the academy, standing at the touchline, always like someone's dad.
Getting wingers to run out.
Yeah, and just but training him to play right back, because they basically said this is your route into the team. They knew he had a talent, but he was centre mid. He ain't going to get in a centre mid for us. So it's circumstantial, innit? The Nico Williams thing, as you just said. If Wirtz doesn't sign for Liverpool this summer, maybe Elliott isn't going anywhere. If Wirtz doesn't happen for any reason,
decides he wants to go to Bayern,
decides he wants to go somewhere else, Elliott isn't leaving Liverpool, because Liverpool will wait for the next person. Gerald Quansah, the same thing. Maybe Liverpool know they've got someone, that's why he's going to go. So it's timing, it's circumstantial, and the role of academies, as you say, Beth, is to develop really good footballers. It's partly why we introduced the UK-wide academy system, because the players almost just being nurtured for their team and no one else knew cast aside. Whereas, I always remember reading about United doing this and having a conversation with Benitez when he was at Liverpool. That's what United did. They brought in players, they played big parts in the team. It made the club money, but mainly it made money to find the next one, to find the next Steven Gerrard and stuff like that. It kept it ticking over. And if them lads get boss careers out of it, so be it. If you want the best example of circumstance, look at Man City's. I seen a tweet last night saying if Chelsea sign a couple more players, they can basically sign all of the attacking players that City had at their academy. Delap, Gibbons, everyone. There's Morgan Rogers, everyone like that. And you think, they're all players that City probably would want now. But when they were coming through, they were never going to get a game regularly for City. They were never going to squeeze out an Aguero. They were never going to squeeze out. I think you look at the players City have developed who are arguably world class or just international class, that level below. But they've had to go elsewhere to then get up. That just happens in work, doesn't it? People leave jobs, go out sideways to go back up because there's something blocking them in their organisation.
But it's funny as well, because you think, it's changed a little bit this year. Quite a few players at City have been given opportunities, but I know 12 months ago people were like, why would you go to Man City? You don't get opportunities. But you look at that now and you think, well, what an education these lads have all had, and what almost why wouldn't you? Being Morgan Rogers doesn't sound too bad, does it? And I'm sure he says, do you know what? It didn't quite happen for me at Man City, but that coaching I got from 14 to 17 was fucking unbelievable.
Meant that I could probably go in a Villa at one above. And Liverpool are doing it now. Liverpool are signing players that have gone elsewhere. The transfer trade and academy level lads is like, it's madness, isn't it?
And also the thing as well with because I think City are the perfect example of it. The amount of players who are at a really high level now who came through City's academy, but there's not actually that many who you look at and you think, when you think of everything that City have done over the past few years, they were wrong to let them go, because a lot of them are really good players, but aside from Cole Palmer, I'm not quite sure there's many that I would look at.
No one's saying Jadon Sancho anymore now.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, and maybe if Sancho had been given a chance and he'd come through at City, it might have been different. But I think really Cole Palmer is the only one that stands out, as we think they have made a bit of an error letting him go. But even so, if he'd have stayed and he hadn't have got those chances, then would he be the Cole Palmer that has been really successful at Chelsea? Probably not. So it's a hard balance to strike. But I think Liverpool. I think you've got to look at how well run Liverpool have been over the past few years, and certainly now, they seem to have all sort of the smartest people in the room back, and you've sort of got to put your faith in them making the right decisions, because they've not really given us too much reason to doubt that.
Yeah. Where do you think he'll go? Where do you think he should go, Harvey Elliott?
I mean, Brighton have been heavily linked, aren't they, as a club? You can see why. That might suit him. Maybe he's got a sight slightly higher out than that in terms of European football and stuff. I think he should be looking at certainly looking at clubs who are in and around the Champions League, playing in the Champions League. I mentioned, Spurs before. They got in a little bit through, say, backdoor. They won a trophy to get there, but they were never competing from a league position point of view. But I think that type of level, certainly top half of the Premier League, absolutely. I think Wolves got mentioned recently, and I just thought, absolutely fucking not, really. No disrespect to Wolves, but where they've been and where they are, I just don't think. I think that's a level or two below. Now they've had some good players. Listen, Cooney was there recently. He's gone to United, so it's not like they haven't had good footballers. But I think if you're going from Liverpool now, given where he's been, what he's achieved, he should be looking at teams who are kind of regularly in the top half of the Premier League, and as I say, competing in Europe. That feels fair to me. But it's hard to say with certainty because sometimes players, and certainly ones who live Liverpool, there are a few that have obviously gone on a really good career since, but there are loads who just haven't lived up to the heights post Liverpool. So they leave and then it doesn't quite work out for them. So you're never quite sure. Jay's point around circumstance. You've got to get that club. You've got to get it right. You want a stable club with a good manager. Not too much upheaval. So maybe someone like Tottenham now with a new manager just offers a little bit of that, but you never know with a club like that because they do chop and change and stuff. So it's a tricky one for them, John. But you just hope it works out. And he seems like one of the good guys to me. And because he's a Liverpool fan, what I always liked about Harvey, or one of the things I liked about him, he could just tell how much it meant. He could just tell. And I think as someone who's just watching football, to see someone who kind of embraces it in that way, you can tell there's an absolute kind of passion within him to represent the football club on a regular basis, to do the best by them. And you want it to work for those reasons, because that does kind of strike a bit of a chord. Certainly stuff like that with me, where you think it matters to this person. It really fucking matters to them. But unfortunately, it is tough at that level. And if you're not absolutely, cream of the crop, then sometimes you might just not make it. And as I say, I think the guy we've got in charge now, his standards are unbelievable, and that's where you want to be. That's how it should be. And unfortunately, it might mean that one or two fall by the wayside, but that is football.
Where do you think you should go, Beth?
Yeah, I think a club like Brighton, like Brentford. I mean, I take Ian's point about sort of having European aspirations, and I think if he could get to a club like that, then that would be great. I suppose the only issue is if he went to an English club playing in Europe, then it's a similar situation to Liverpool, where they'll still be spending big money, and he, I guess, maybe won't be the shiny new toy kind of thing, and he might have to fight a little bit more for his place. Whereas I think if he went to a Brighton, to a Brentford, to a Forest, for example, he'd probably be starting week in, week out, and could become a real sort of one of the main men in that team. So yeah, I agree. I don't think he, I felt the same about Kelleher. I don't think he should be going to a team right near the bottom of the Premier League and fighting against relegation, because I think he's better than that. Maybe we've seen a few English players go abroad over the past few years. I mean, look at Scott McTominay and what he's managed to achieve going to Napoli. So maybe there's an option abroad for him as well. But I think wherever he goes, he's got the sort of attitude where you can imagine him being successful anywhere. And just sort of going back to your point about sort of worrying about academies and things like that, football's cyclical. It's only a couple of years ago Tyler Morton was starting games for Liverpool in the Premier League. Now I think that Liverpool had an injury crisis at the time, and that was when he got his chance. But he looked really good, and I think at that point you thought, well, maybe he could really kick on for Liverpool. Stefan Bajcetic a couple of years ago as well. You looked at him and thought he looks like he's going to be a real talent, and he might still be, but there's every chance that he ends up leaving Liverpool, if not this summer, then next as well. So, hopefully not, but in a year, 2 years' time, Liverpool could be battling for top four, and then all of a sudden the less of an attractive prospect to players from elsewhere, and you do have to give a chance to maybe people within your own ranks, which is no bad thing, but ultimately I'm sure most people would rather Liverpool be competing at the very top end. So it's a hard trade-off. But yeah, I think Harvey, wherever he goes, he'll do well.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. Best of luck to him if he does indeed move on. Who knows? Football can be a funny thing. Okay, that is the end of part one. Coming up, we're going to talk about ticketing. And we are back in the room, and it is still John Gibbons hosting. I'm still joined by Ian Ryan, by Jay Mckenna, and by Beth Lindop to talk about things going on with Liverpool Football Club at the moment. And one thing that is going on is that they have announced some changes to ticketing from next season. So generally, to do with sales, but also how we distribute tickets, how we pass tickets amongst each other, and so on. Just before we start, I do want to say that, as ever, we've reached out to Liverpool asking for if anyone wants to come on and have a bit of a chat. Phil Dutton did so very kindly last time. It looks like he is coming in tomorrow to have a chat with us. I'm just saying looks like, because obviously things can happen and things can change, and through no one's fault. So if it doesn't happen, I don't want to, people reading too much into it. Circumstances change with lots of things, but I just thought it was important to say at the top that we have asked someone from Liverpool to come in and have a bit of a chat about it, about things that are maybe a little bit unclear, and try and clear a couple of things up for not just us but Liverpool sports in general. And looks like that's happening tomorrow, so I did want to say that first. But I guess I'll start with you, Jay. The club put out a few changes last week with regard, like I say, towards distribution and what happens when we have a ticket and when we buy a ticket and what we do with that. You're still involved in the supporters board, whether you like it or not. He's
the worst kind of volunteer, the one who volunteers, leaves, and then re-volunteers again.
Still sort of ends up doing it, but you're also still involved in that. The supporters board put something out about 24 hours later detailing ways that they were unhappy with certain things. So from speaking to Liverpool supporters, from Spirit to Shanky, speaking to their members and stuff like that, what general concerns have you got, and have other Liverpool fans who spoke to you got about these changes?
I think that it's just important from the outset to say, because some people have seen this said online, well, why wasn't this suggested? None of these changes were things the supporters board or supporters went to the club and said, we want you to change these, can we sit in a room and talk about them? They fall out of things where the club have done that. I think part of their surveying and focus groups, and I think them picking up the noise around some of these issues. But the club came to the supporters board with a list of, I think, 8 things they wanted to look at, 7 of which are in this. One's been deferred, which is I think, around disabled supporters and kind of spaces and access and stuff like that. So it's not majorly kind of thingy in terms of what it is directly going to impact people this season. That's good, something they're going to review. They came on them and, in a way, heartened by, but it's still a frustrating feeling. Lots of the things I know people said in that immediate 24 hours, the supporters board kind of did deliberately take a little bit of time to just see what people were saying, make sure it kind of did chime with our feelings. It was quite welcome to see lots of people saying stuff like, why are you doing this, what's the purpose, what change does it drive, can't you have 2 lists, one who you buy for, and stuff like that. Lots of which was what we'd said in the room with the club, and supporters spent, and just to say, a lot of time meeting with Liverpool. I know those closely involved on this met Liverpool pretty much every fortnight on a Thursday evening regularly, talking to Liverpool about this, so they committed the time. The club did as well, fair to their staff. But I think that the thing that kind of people come away from is it's the impact that has on legitimate ticketing behaviour. So the club's ambition, I think, is to tackle, well, a few things. And if I'm honest, and this is not something I haven't said to them, so I'm not kind of saying this after the fact, I think feels a little confused. Even I do. It's is it to tackle touting? Well, I could probably point to a load of ways in which it doesn't do that and probably pushes people towards that. Is it misuse? They say it is, but one person's misuse is, I think there's big grey areas around that. They talk about fairness. I think every time you try and do, and this is a problem on ticketing, one thing, I'd never want to do Phil's job, ever. No, you know what I mean? Because it's difficult. For everyone you try and tackle an unfairness for, you create an unfairness somewhere else. Yeah. And that's a problem, and I don't think we've had an
fairness is in the eyes of the beholder.
And I think this is a big problem with ticketing generally. I think everyone wants a ticketing system that largely suits their circumstances and needs and wants, rather than actually is fair. And I don't think you'll ever get fair, because supply is, outstrips demand outstrips supply, and stuff. So I kind of come away from it, John, thinking, does this make it easier, fairer, and stuff like that? And I think, for too many people, no, it doesn't. I think there's ways in which we could have done it better. Things we were saying in the room, which is, if you want to kind of cap friends and family, because I think they felt that was being misused by some people, some of big lists. It's well, they do, but it was almost a system. You had to add people before the deadline, so it's welcome they've removed the deadline. adding people as we need, because anyone who goes to the match knows they've had that circumstance where someone says, oh, can I take my nephew, can I take my son? Like, my son wasn't on my friends and family last year, didn't fancy going. My nephew was. But if he'd have wanted to go, I'd have been having to like kind of create a new account under a black name or a slight variation on his name just to get him a NFC pass so that he could go to the game. So removing that's welcome, but I think the way what the club describes that as tackling, I think creates problems elsewhere. So I think they say there's an issue with distribution, for example. Of the changes that I think are most unfair, regardless of anyone's circumstance, I wouldn't need 18 friends and family and stuff like that. I think distribution is the most unfair change. And I say that as a season ticket holder. I said that to Liverpool at the outset. I think it's the most unfair. We said that repeatedly to Liverpool. Liverpool, to be fair to them, will say they've heard it, but they felt it was something that they needed to change. And I just think it unfairly... If these are attempts to tackle misuse and unfairness and stuff like that, one of the things I've too often felt Liverpool do, whether it be about sanctions or tickets, is sometimes they use a sledgehammer to crack a nut. And this feels a little bit like that, and it creates that sense of unintended consequences of your changes, and it's casts a wide net and all of this stuff that I just think cause you other problems that I do think and could talk to about, and I'll stop on this point and obviously hear from others, but could have been addressed. What I would say, as chair of the supporters board and as someone who's been close to lots of these conversations, right up until the club put out what they put out, up till the day before, there'd been emails back and forth and stuff like that, where I do think if there were just a few tweaks, the club could have got the general sense of their policy change. It's the implementation that's the problem. I think you've probably got a very different supporter board release. I think you'd got one where it was kind of like, all right, we think this is broadly in the right direction, what do you think? Because it would have given exemptions or exclusions and kind of introduced the policy, I think, in a better way than what feels a bit hard-edged in parts.
Yeah, just to clarify on that distribution thing, because not everyone lives it as much as me and you do. Up until last season, you could distribute if you were a member. So season ticket holders can largely do what we want with our tickets, and it obviously doesn't cost against you. For members, it's different, because members will lose credit if they forward on. So if you buy a ticket and then forward it on to someone else, you lose the credit because the person you forward it on to then gets the credit. And that was to try and create a fairer, that word again, system where the person who was actually going and was effectively ultimately paying for the ticket, because obviously there'd be money passed over, would then get the credit, but they don't want to create a situation where both people are getting the credit, because then credits always become meaningless. And so that's what would happen. But you get 2, if you like, free hits a season.
And that was the thing supporters on our side, kind of representatives going into the room, worked with the club on introducing a few years back. So it kind of worries us, because it's like, well, if we can agree that with you because you made some changes and this was kind of a safety net for people, and then you can remove it a few years later, well, what can you do now with the changes in a few years' time? Yeah. How do they ratchet up or suddenly change? What's the point in us sitting in rooms, and I felt like this, what's the point in sitting in rooms trying to help this work well if you're then just going to change it or not listening to some of what we're saying to help you do this well? That is a feeling I've got, and it's a feeling people on the supporters board have got. And I think the counter, John, I've read this on forums this week, people saying, well, to get to that point, to need that safety net as a member, because it's only for 13 plus, and you probably will buy all 19, you'd need to pass on 6 or 7. But that might happen because life events happen. Like, you might work changes, fixtures aren't set, so that kind of 2 is a little bit of a buffer. So if you pass on 3 or 4 because they move for us a telly, and that's probably going to happen to Liverpool because we're going to do dead well and we're going to get far.
You buy the tickets before you know when they are.
Before they've even moved for telly, let alone that Liverpool progressing competitions. So if you're a member and you've worked hard to get to that, and there's jeopardy in member sales in there because you fall below that 13 plus, you're in the 12 plus and it's a lottery, you could fall down on your credits, and it's a challenge for people. It was meant to act as a safety net for people. Our argument to Liverpool, and I think is one that should happen, is my sense of Liverpool say it's unfair on members with 12 or less credits. Now, in the survey we did, members with 12 or less credits said, no, you should keep that. When they were asked,
because they actually want to be in
because they want to be in that. So people want things that they might get themselves. They said they want to keep it. So it was pointed out to Liverpool, you're arguing unfairness on behalf of people who aren't saying it's unfair. But even if you think that's unfair, my argument of fairness is you should level up. You don't level down. And that is, I think, the worry people have about the direction of travel. But we propose compromises. So it was like, Liverpool said to us they want to know who's in the ground. Absolutely fair, understand that. Does slightly fly in the face when there's Dua Lipa tickets and Lara Del Rey tickets flying around and they've got no idea who's going on there. It's like, why do you only need to know who's in the ground for a football match but not a concert? Hospitality don't need to, that season ticket holders do. We were like, well, can't you do it through the friends and family list? Like, because distribute means you can pass to anyone.
Yeah.
I do get why they would say that's unfair. So pass it to someone on your friends and family list, but give you them 2 free hits. If I'm honest, they haven't said this. I think they can't because the system doesn't allow it. But they say they don't want to do that, and I'm like, well, sometimes the changes are like the 7 out of 7 changes coming in, and I'm like, maybe you get 6.5 out of 7. Maybe you get the principle of that change, but you phase it in. They didn't want to, and it's like there were too many bits where we offered solutions or compromise that just felt like they weren't being heard, or they weren't able to do, or they didn't want to do, and that felt really frustrating. And I think from supporters who we spoke to, they say to us, well, couldn't they have done this? And I'm sitting there going, yeah, we asked. Like, the release does show that. It says loads of, I think, on what people probably said in the immediate aftermath, and I think it'll be interesting to see how Liverpool see that, because I think their intention is one thing, the practical reality for supporters on the ground is the other, and with all of the best intentions, as we know, that never meets in the middle, and that'll be the challenge, I think, for Liverpool. We've got a survey out at the minute kind of asking people for feedback, and lots of it is coming in saying, like, can't you have 2 lists for who you buy for? That distribution was a safety net. Like, it feels like if you'd just tweaked and altered these a little bit, you might have got something that felt more palatable to supporters.
It just gets so confusing here. It's confusing for me. I've tried my best to sort of get my head around it all. I am a season ticket holder. I try and speak to members. I put it in on our subscribers group about, like, what you want me to talk about if we do get some time with Phil and obviously with Jay today. And, you know, people are coming at it from their own angle, but then you realise, like, my experience as a season ticket holder is completely different to a member who's got 17 credits, and their experience is completely different to a member who's got 8 credits, and what they have to know and what they're able to do and what it means for them to pass on a ticket is so much. I had a mate who's had a season ticket for years ring me this morning and go, like, someone's asking me about going on my friends and family next year, like, what's the score? They're like, you just don't know. It always feels like you need a degree in ticketing just for Jay to take his nephew.
I know. Listen, I think, you know, Jay's far closer to the detail than me. That's fairly obvious to say, and sometimes you feel a little bit like a bit of a fraud talking about some stuff like this, because you've mentioned there, no, I've been a season ticket holder for a long time, and I'm probably the oldest in the room, so I've had mine when it wasn't as hard, you know, it was more of an affordability thing, and listen, affordability thing is still a thing now, but availability, it was a little bit easier. You know, Anfield wasn't necessarily selling out every single game. You know, you go to the kind of mid-80s, and some of the cup games, they might only be getting kind of, you know, late 20s, early 30s in terms of, you know, 30,000 people going to the match, so it has massively changed since then, and I think it's really hard to please everyone. Your point there, everyone will see this through their own prism, and that's part of the problem, because we've all got skin in the game. So, you know, season ticket holders will want it to stay relatively nice and easy for season ticket holders, because why wouldn't you? You want an easy life, you know. Jay's point there about different lists, you know, I can absolutely take that on board, because we've all got mates who dedicate time, you know, taking time off work to try and sort everyone else out, to try and box people, to try and buy the tickets. So not everyone else has got to take time off work. So there's people in groups who are doing that. Like,
I just also want to go together.
Well, yeah,
people want
to go together. But I think some of this, John, as well, you know, obviously I haven't known you for like the last 8-9 years. I know match day for you, you're a fucking busy boy. You know what I mean? You're like Geppetto pulling strings all over the gaff. You know what I mean? Not anymore. But I can imagine for you, that's probably some days a pain in the arse, because you've got to do stuff, but also probably quite rewarding, because you get to box people, and that's, you know, there's a nice feeling around sorting people out. But I don't think the club want that. I don't think they want people sorting out the mates. I think they want to have more control. And listen, maybe some of this is because they want to get the tickets back, and then you want to do something with them corporate wise. I don't know. Jay'll know more on that than I will, but you listen to other fans of other teams, and that certainly seems to be the direction of travel, where if they can get hold of the ticket back off someone, then they can make a few more quid on it. And I think I was reading something recently on Barcelona and the kind of redevelopments of the Nou Camp, or the Camp Nou, whichever way you want to phrase it. And no, that's going to open this season, I think, partially open for maybe about 55,000-60,000 people. They're building a full complex there, which is all about maximising your commercial revenue on match day. That is the direction of travel for all club. They want to be able to do that. You know, in that case of Barcelona, they're going to create a complex. They're going to, you know, follow people around in terms of, you know, be able to track where they're spending their money, and if things aren't going, or no, they're not kind of working, they'll change it up a little bit. Liverpool will want to maximise the commercial matchday revenue as much as they possibly can, and I'm probably a pain in the arse for them, because I turn up 15 minutes before the game, buy a bottle of water and go to my seat. That's not what they want. They don't want that. They want people who are going to spend money in the club shop, people who are going to spend money in and around the ground and stuff, food, all that kind of stuff. So I think they'll have an eye on that, just how can they maximise that a little bit more, and maybe some of this is pointing towards that. But as I say, Jay will have a better, clearer idea on that than I will. But ultimately, it's just really, really hard, isn't it, to please people? It is really, really hard, and you know, you feel for people who are giving up the time and energy to do some of this during the week. But yeah, what are the answers? What I'd be interested in, Jay, from your points, you've mentioned some stuff there about going back to Liverpool. Are they showing a willingness to get back round the table on some of this, or is it now done and dusted? It is what it is.
There's no offer to come back around the table. Okay. No, I think they seen this as full and final, but well, I'm an optimist, but also fucking stubborn, so I don't. Like, there's a question in the support sports today, they say, if we go back to the club with this stuff, like, I think Liverpool might read that and go, you're not fucking coming back to asking me that, mate, but like, you know, preempt Phil being on here tomorrow. We fucking are, because people that sometimes there's things I would have thought were good, but people have, you know, there's been some interesting feedback on some of this that I think, okay, that's interesting to understand and appreciate. I think you know, the thing I always say to Liverpool is you've got to be clear about why you're doing it on anything. I think transparency is dead important on tickets, because no one believes anything. People always say, well, I sold my season ticket seat back and it got sold for corporate. There's literally no one's. People always tweet SOS, they tweet me or whatever and go, this.
Is that a thing, Chase?
No one's ever showed me evidence that seat's the one being sold. A seat in the nearby vicinity might have, but not that seat. But that myth takes hold, doesn't it? Because then people perceive and will perceive this as...
Is that going on at other clubs, that practice? Because you hear it a lot. I've heard it
happens at other clubs. It has happened at others. I've no evidence that I've seen that it's happened at Liverpool. If someone's got it, feel free to send me it.
Do you think that could be the direction of travel they're thinking about in terms of getting it back, selling it for a bit more?
I think there's a thing of, well, in a way, that's what they do now with a season ticket holder, don't they? So if I sell my ticket back, my Cop season ticket's 40 quid. Yeah. But on average a game.
Yeah.
But you sell that probably, say, 44. So they get more when they sell that on anyway. I think it's understandable. So there's a thing about control of tickets. There's touting and then I think there's perceived control. And I think the club have an opinion on this, and I think supporters do. But I think supporters then have a multitude of opinions. So if you're a fan on the membership and it's trying in the late sales to get a ticket, you don't want John or me saying I can't go, so I'm giving it to my lads, or I'm going to move tickets around and I'm going to get it to Dave's nephew or whoever.
Yeah.
They don't. That fan wants the chance to go.
But there's people who rely on tickets popping up late. But then they rely on season ticket holders like me selling it back.
But at the same time, there's people who rely on who get to go the game because you have a spare last minute. Yeah. And I, in a meeting with Liverpool, and I would ask fans the same thing: how many of us went the game the first time because someone had a spare?
Yeah,
loads of people did. I didn't. I won a competition. We'll talk about Manchester Island goals in a bit, but largely that's how people start getting the habit of going to matching if they get a spare.
Yeah.
Dad can't go, uncle can't go, mate can't go. They go the game, they go on spares. My nephew's had his first chance to do it. My son will probably get the same thing this season. He'll get to go to a proper game on a spare. So I see the other side of it because that then creates a next level of fan.
And it's boss that you sort those people out and they're so excited.
You've got to find a way to do both. And it feels to me like sometimes it's like, well, if you do that, in some people's mind, fans and some at the club, they might think you're doing something wrong, but it's also just what you've done. It's how the match is. It's not awful. Supply and demand don't match up.
But the club will control that. So, no, the example before about Gibbo, who can sort out people on a day, whilst you can see like loads of value in that, like John sorting out good people with a ticket, they'll be thinking, well, we want to sort people out who we feel are next on the list. That's how they'll see it, won't they? They won't be.
And maybe so. This is the conundrum in it. Who's right in that regard? Now, I think. Again, there'll be fans who'll sit and listen to this who'll go, you're right, the club are right, they should control
I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that's my opinion,
I mean, what you said,
that's what the club will be thinking.
I mean what you said, but then there'll be people, me and Gibbo could imagine loads of them at the match who go, no, that's not how going the match works. And are you at a detriment then if you're not in the know? Yeah, of course you are. So I think you need to think of the system what we shouldn't be doing is arguing and talking about as a club, with the club, just these changes in isolation. We should be looking at the bigger picture. How do you find that next generation and let them start going to match and build loyalty in their own things? Look at your lad, my lad's not, similar age, John, and I don't want them going to match on benevolence forever. I want them the chance to build their own thing. But then that probably means we really need to have a conversation about the loyalty system rather than about individual changes in isolation, because it's all well and good saying this ticket should go to someone on the members list or the next on the season ticket waiting list. Mine and your lad can't join the season ticket waiting list because it's closed. The next person getting a ticket on the season ticket waiting list is 30 odd years of age. And we've all just been talking about the academy. Everyone says about a scouser in a team. When you need kids in the stands, you need scouse kids in the stands.
Yeah. But also, what happens when my lad, when he's 18, goes, I don't want to go with my dad anymore. He's boring. Do you know what I mean? I want to go with my mates. Like, how does that happen?
Well, and that's...
I didn't shed a tear there. He'll obviously never think that, but there is a chance.
But he might, yeah. In 18 years' time, give yourself time. You're not boring yet, give up, but give him time.
No, but you know what I mean? Like,
you'll do well if you make it to 18 without thinking about it.
Honestly, John, that catch on his head thing's going to get bored for him one day. But Sam, when he's a kid, he does it himself. But
put your fucking clothes back on with you.
Had you fucking nearly 60. But in all seriousness, that's what you've got to create. Now, everyone wants that thing, and I've been fortunate enough to, they've done an amnesty on season tickets and it happens. 5 into 4 doesn't go. Say this to the club all the time. 5 into 4 doesn't go. Someone's got to miss out. It's about who that is. It's having an honest conversation. It's really difficult. I think the club, with the best of intentions, look at policy changes like this to what they might perceive as fair enough, but it's just so difficult. Every which way you turn, there's a problem. It is. And someone at Liverpool asked me recently, they go like, it's really difficult. So I was like, yeah, but ticketing's going to be in it. Because after signing players and Liverpool winning games, it's probably the things that matters next to most people. But for probably a lot of people, it matters more. Doesn't matter who's on that pitch. You want to go and watch Liverpool play, whether we're dead good and it's Harvey Elliott or we're brilliant and it's Florian Wirtz. People want to go and watch Liverpool play. So it's going to be the most emotive topic. And that I think sometimes behind some of this, it makes it difficult because emotion overrides it. And I think the club gets offensive, supporters get offensive, and it's like, what? The question I keep coming back to, and you posed at the beginning, John, is what does this solve? And I worry that some of the changes here actually just create other problems rather than actually solving the problem you think you were going to try and create. You're probably going to try and solve in the first place.
I put something else on our subscribers group, Beth, and the word that was used a lot was cliff edge, and it was like the cliff edge from 13 members, down, are you going to lose them? There's the thing where if you give up your season to get them not getting it back, and there's all this panic and worry that sort of creates things. I think about, it's up to you whether you want to talk about yourself or not, but I was thinking, for you built up all this credit, and then suddenly you're on a press seat, and what happens to all that? And then what if in a year you decide, you want to go and do something else, you want to become a firefighter, I don't know, and then you're like, well, that year I spent in the press box, do you know what I mean? Like, means I'm starting from zero again. Everyone's on this cliff edge, and everyone's in this situation where they worry, well, if I do the right thing, if I say, well, I'm not going anymore, or I'm not going to this game or whatever, then I'm just going to lose out. So they don't, and I feel like in this, we've ended up sort of creating a situation where it's either too much hassle to pass your tickets on, or there's too much risk, and then everyone gets even more protective. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And like the guys have said, everyone has a vested interest in protecting their own situation and their own family and their own friends' situation. I'm really fortunate, sort of same as Ian. Prior to working in the job that I do now, I had a season ticket. So, and before that I was a kid, so my dad just sorted everything out. So I can't speak about this with the same authority that Jay can, or that you can, but it is tough. And again, I sort of leave all of the ticket and stuff to my dad. And let him sort it. But you probably have some people say, in the interests of fairness, I still have a season ticket. But people say,
but that's what I mean. Why would you give it up?
Yeah,
because you don't know what's going to be the case next year.
Well, that's the thing. But you probably have some people say, well, you're going the game anyway in the press box, so that's a season ticket that isn't maybe being used every single week. And it is being used, but not by me. But then the alternative is I say, right, okay, well, in the interest of total fairness, I give that back to the club, and it goes to someone who's been waiting for it. But then, like you say, I become an astronaut or something. I don't know. I'm not planning on it.
That'd be a massive commute.
Yeah,
be a nightmare of fixtures change.
And the season ticket waiting list is closed.
You can't even get on it,
you can't get on it. So it's such a difficult one, and there isn't a fair way. There isn't one way that is completely fair to absolutely everyone. And I think the thing is as well, for a lot of people on the COP and people who've been going for years and years, the way it has always been is, you go with your family, you go with your friends. If you get a spare ticket, that's how you go, and you take it. I mean, when there used to be physical manual tickets, my dad, before match days, he used to be like running up and down between pubs like in Anfield, giving like one, and not in a dodgy way, it was just to friends and to whatever, but like sorting people out. And again, like Ian said, he loved doing that.
And that's one of the challenges for people who've gone the match for years, is they're like, hang on, when it was 30,000, you didn't mind me doing this. You didn't mind me having spares when it was fan cards and you weren't selling out. But now the demand's grown, I've got to change something I'm doing. And maybe you do, maybe you're right. The pure principle of fairness is you can't go, someone else, it's not your season ticket, it's Liverpool's, but it's just in your name, you should give it back. But you're out forever then. So the club do this thing where, and it's a good principle, a season ticket holiday. So if I lost my job, I could say to Liverpool, I can't go this year. Do you want to let someone, I'll take a holiday, Liverpool will sell that to someone else for the year, but I lose my credits. I don't get back on, so I won't get back on to any of the, never mind the ACS, but having the credits for the cup games the year after. So what's my incentive to give back to Liverpool? There's zero incentive for me to give that back to Liverpool. Instead, it encourages a perverse behaviour and do something else. And I think this of some of these changes, none of this addresses burner phones, which we know is widespread in the ground and stuff like that. But
and we'll get more.
And I think this does that job. So I think if you buy for somebody else and you're the people, and there are loads, Liverpool have showed us the data, but I think it's not just about people buying for away games, people who buy for their mates in the member sale or the cup games and kids tickets here and there. People have different levels of loyalty. I think if you think, well, I buy for 5, 6, 7 people there, 8 people, 10, 12, whatever it is, well, I'm just going to have a spare phone as one of them 18 on my friends and family. And if I can't pass it to someone else, they'll have the ticket off that and I'll just give them the phone. Or distribution. If you're a member and you're worried about that cliff edge, well, you put your ticket on a spare phone and you go on it most times, but a couple of times you don't, you give it to your dad or someone like that, then the club will never know. So the club has data on how many people forward on tickets, but no one on a burner phone ever forwards on a ticket. So the data's not pure, and it will encourage that behaviour. And it's kind of like almost you've got to like really zoom out, probably go to space and be an astronaut to look at this in the bigger picture, because it's so difficult. Now, there's what's technically right on paper, isn't there, as you say there, and what's thingy. On friends and family, people pass tickets on to other people. It's just a thing they do. Now, there's some fans who think that should change, but where you draw the line is the challenge. So we did say to them, and I personally think 18 probably feels amenable and suitable to people and happy with if there's a separate list for those who you buy for. So if you buy, so like, I don't at the minute buy for many people, but say like, say we get the Carling Cup final, League Cup final, and it's my job to buy for 12 mates. Well, I might not be able to buy the tickets for them, because I might have used it to pass on to people. Because the people you buy for aren't the same as who you pass on to.
Because they've got tickets.
Because they've got tickets, yeah. So maybe your number can be different if in the future if you wanted to, but you'll have a separate list for who you buy for. That's my thing of like, you would have got 18 as the cap. You would have absolutely set a precedent for, that you cap this. But most people wouldn't be negatively affected. Because there are good bits in this. You can have people as and when you want and stuff like that. You can pass on still multiple times. That works. On the distribution, we'll keep it, but introduce it to friends and family, see if it changes. The club reckon, I think they said, and we said this in the thing, there's about 300 odd people who would have lost out if this policy was enacted last year. We did even say to them, we'll just say ring fence them. Even, and I don't want them to, tell us you're going to do this policy next year, but give people a chance to get used to it, come in and safeguard those people if they fall below this year and they didn't want to do it. It's like, that's one of those changes where you're right, it's a cliff edge. Same with how you buy, and this wraps up, it's not a change they're doing now, but it's how you buy tickets. You, John, you go to most away games, I think. if you go to, say you couldn't make Bournemouth, fans by and large, right or wrong, have to still buy that Bournemouth ticket and find someone else to go, because that means you don't get the next game. It means you don't get 19 the year after. If I miss one Champions League game this season coming up, I'm not just out this season and the chance of a final ticket. I'm out the year after. You're out forever. So it encourages behaviour that's not actually fair, not even natural, is it? But it's this fear of missing out then that drives everything, and that's a thing.
Yeah, you wouldn't do that with anyone else. You wouldn't go to the supermarket and go, well, I don't need milk, but I better buy it because I won't be able to get meat tomorrow.
Unless it's lockdown, yeah. But again, fear drives that. It's the fear of missing out that drives behaviour that you wouldn't compute, but you're doing it over the thing that people are most passionate about, and that's one of the things I'm kind of like, you can do some of these changes, I think, if you just tweak little bits to make them a little bit fairer, but it does drive behaviours that, listen, we're football fans, we're irrational. We go and watch millionaires kick a ball around and pay loads of money for it, so of course it's irrational. And then don't be surprised then when they're irrational about the opportunity to go and do that, right or wrong.
Okay, there's a couple of other things I just wanted to say, because I've seen a bit online around, touting and this idea of, there's mass touting going on as season ticket holders in a large number of selling tickets on. There's no doubt that it is happening, but some of the numbers that I've seen and know you've seen, Jay, is absolutely wild. This idea there's 10,000 season ticket holders, touting for tickets. From my experience, people are a little bit likely to take a hit than rather the other way around. How often do you see someone say, "Oh, just give us 40 quid" or something like that? Like there's a lad who I know who asked me to move his season ticket on because he doesn't live in the city, and he'll always take a hit on it. So that is much more prevalent. People are generally, Ian's mentioned me a couple of times. Like there's a lot of people like me who are just trying to.
John's just trying to dial his ear in case LFC sanctions him.
Listen, they can look. I'm transparent. They can look at my account and see how many tickets I'm passing through and where the mad places I've ended up. I'm not bothered. Do you know what I mean? Like because I do it all through defensive family and stuff like that. But whatever. But there's most people just don't want empty seats. So someone will come to me and say, "John, I've got this spare," and I'll say, "Well, someone's asked me for the ticket this morning," and I'll use mine to pass through there, even if I have to sort of sit somewhere else, because I hate it. If I go to the ground and I'm sat there and there's an empty seat next to me, I hate it, because I'm like, there's so many people who would love to be there. I sit in the upper Kerry. I hate even looking across at the main stand and the corporates and seeing empty seats. And I'm like, them brands should be giving them tickets away, should be giving them or whatever. I'll say to people, I'll say it now, give it to us and we'll give them away. And to people who can't afford it or whatever it is. But they sort of don't do it. So loads of people like me, and the vast majority just want people to go to the game and just want to give the people, match people who can't go with people who sort of want to, and that's all the vast majority of people are trying to do. So like Jay says, it feels like this breaking up with the sledgehammer when really people are just doing what they've always done, which is just trying to sort people out. And the idea of as well, which another thing that frustrates people, say, "Oh, but if you don't know anyone, well, fucking get to know people." Do you know what I mean? Like
loads of people are doing that in the subscribers.
That's it. So the Facebook subscribers group, like, you don't have to live in Liverpool to get a ticket. You don't have to drink in the Glenbook or the 12th man and hang around waiting for the ticket. Our Facebook subscribers group, people are sorting each other all the time. Forums. I know so many people who got the first away tickets off Red All Over the Land.
Red All Over the Land or Red My Cop.
Yeah, or Red My Cop. Just going on, and then someone going like, "There's so there's ways, online to just get to know people, to expand your network, join a supporters club. They're a brilliant way of accessing tickets and stuff like that. Like, just there is ways of doing it, which is aside from this idea of, "Oh, we need to live in Liverpool and have loads of mates," because it just isn't true.
This is the problem of the discussion too often, is it's not rooted in data and truth, and it's rooted in person's perception. There's a decided, thankfully, with my better judgment, to not indulge in the thread on Reddit on this, because there were people on there saying about how Spirit of Shankly argued against ticket price increases because it would have bet into their profit margins on all the tickets that we were apparently touting, which is like incredible, like really, to think that we put that much thought into it, to be fair. But it was like, it's this, I think the club published data last year. I think about 100 odd accounts were sanctioned. They didn't give us a breakdown. I've actually asked on the back of this kind of conversation. But of the evidence I've seen, and we get lots of people via SOS coming to us, they've had a problem with ticketing. As many members' accounts, if not more. through that, but just by sheer weight of numbers, there's more members and stuff like that. You know, season ticket holders aren't touting tickets en masse. I think what some people are maybe calling touting is they can't go, so they give a ticket to a mate, but that's not touting. These are two different things. But you're right about the every game stuff, John, about, you know, the seats being full. It has not escaped the attention of anyone who's been involved in the ticketing conversations with the club to hear them talk about, you know, we just want all the seats used, we just want all the seats used. And then we turn up at a game and you spend 10 minutes of the second half, watching all the hospitality slowly filter back in, all empty seats. And we've got photos of the director's box in various games like that with seats not being used. And it's like, this is to put my then issue with fairness. It can't be one rule for one and a different rule for everybody else, and that is what's happened with the using your seat thing, innit? If a hospitality person can distribute to anyone they like, doesn't matter whether they've got a fan account or nothing like that, and if they don't turn up, nothing happens to them because they're under a contract, that's different than a season ticket holder. It's like, well, if you want to do this, then this is the route you want to go down, so let Jam to crack on it and all that. So make it apply to everybody. It's my argument, but I know they're not going to do that, and that's when the fairness argument falls down for me, because I think you're right. People just want to help people go the game. And if the club wants rules on that, fine. Let's sit down and make sure they're rules that are going to work to supporters' advantage, but also to the club's long term. Because I do worry, you know, and United and others have done this. They got really strict on what you can do with tickets, and they burn through their waiting list and stuff like that, like nobody's business. And I think there is almost, I don't want to use this saying because Ian once said it before we had the walkout. But you know, you've just kind of got to be careful what you wish for. You can try and fix some things that then have really unintended consequences to kind of like the match going support and the way people do things that creates a thing that you ultimately sell and makes the club really successful.
Here we go. I was going to talk about Michael Owen. I can't be asked now.
Fucked off, Annie.
Should we just go? Should we just get off? Right. As I said, hopefully we're speaking to Phil Dutton after he's listened to all that. Hopefully Phil's still coming in tomorrow to clarify a couple of things, to answer some of those questions that we've asked, which is what are the purposes, what are you trying to do, and are you confident this will enable you to do it? We all want less talent, we all want more access as the people, but how we go about that is the hardest thing. Thanks a lot to Andy and to Paddy for making all this work, to Jay, to Beth, and to Ian Ryan, and for you guys, if you stuck with it to the end, feel free to let us know. Let Jay know actually what you thought about that discussion.
What time's this going on? I'm going to delete Twitter off my phone and leave the subscribers.
No, thanks a lot to everyone for their contributions. Up to this.